Hi, everyone, and welcome to day 3 of International Careers Week. We're very excited to have Christine with us today. Christine grew up in Germany and studied biology before earning her doctorate in marine biology. Since 2007, she has lived and worked in Costa Rica, researching sea turtles and fighting to protect them. Her video of a turtle having a plastic straw painfully removed from its nose went viral, fueling the global debate over the use of single-use plastic, which has led to bans in many countries. She was named a Next Generation Leader by Time Magazine in 2018. Thank you so much for joining us today, Christine.
Yeah, I'm so glad I can be here and talk a little bit about what it takes to be a sea turtle slash marine biologist, I guess. So I was told I should just jump into just explaining a little bit of how I got to be where I am today. So I think it is probably pretty classic. I think you would go to be really a biologist. I think there's different ins into this career of working with sea turtles, so you don't really have to be a biologist. I'm saying that straight away. Um, but you do have to probably have a degree somewhere in the natural sciences. So that could be environmental sciences, that could be actually I know some people that study geography and then kind of did like a little curve into the field. Most of us though have studied biology or marine biology. Um, I did my undergrad degrees, bachelor, and also my master's in Germany with two universities. And I did not actually specialize in marine biology, so I always kept it a little bit more open just in case I would change my mind, even though I knew pretty early on that I wanted to be a marine biologist. And then did my PhD in marine biology. But I also have to say, you do not have to actually do your PhD to work in what I'm working in. So I started working pretty much already, even before I graduated with my master's. So I pretty much got into the field with a bachelor's degree. And one of the reasons I did not study marine biology was actually that I was more interested in the ecology and in the behavioral aspect. So because if you study marine biology, it is very, marine centered, of course. So you study a bunch of stuff from the little, zooplankton or generally plankton that lives in the ocean all the way up to the vertebrates maybe, but you also study stuff like oceanography, which is more going into the physics. And I was really into the animals. So I really did animal ecology and behavioral physiology in my master's. In order to be more in that niche already. And what's really important in my line of work is that you get hands-on experience as early as you can, which is a little bit sad, especially in the US, as you pay a lot of money for your education. I hate to break it that most universities do not prepare you well enough for field work. So that means you might get a chance to go on a field trip for like maybe a week or two, but now I'm hiring people as well. This is usually not enough for me to convince me that you are prepared to really do the job. And so it is pretty much necessary that you do internships, which a lot of times are unpaid, which is not great. But when you start early enough, I have actually high school graduates that come for 3 months to work in my projects, and they of course have a great basis. Once they get into the field and they also get the degree, they already have quite a few hours under their belts and can show that they actually have worked scientifically, and that gives them an into the door. Other than that, I'm trying to think what else is important. I mean, anything that is kind of tacky is always great. So if you are into computers, if you maybe know how to program something, that is always a good thing to know. A lot of like the new applications that we're using go into the direction of geo information systems. So I, for example, work with satellite transmitters. And so that means I have to analyze the data in a way that's of course statistics, but also displaying it and analyzing it in a geographical sense, right? I have to see where my sea turtles are traveling. I have to kind of calculate where the hotspots of sea turtle occurrence are and those kind of things. So once you get into university, I always would look out for classes that will teach you such applications, because that is really good if you have to compete with a lot of people later on. Maybe another thing is, so of course, depending on where you would like to go and become a marine biologist, 70% of our planet is covered in oceans. So it's pretty much possible to go either to the Arctic or Antarctic, but you can also become a marine biologist like I am in the tropical areas. But I think that is a little bit important to point out that, of course, we have to be very careful, because in the global south, of course, there's also people that study marine biology who would like to have jobs that we're not taking away jobs from those people, right? So I kind of would like to instill that right from the start, from the get-go. Everybody dreams of working somewhere in the tropics, but I think we have to be very mindful of our privilege if we're coming from the global north. And if we're going into this career, that we're being, a little bit conscientious about where we're going to work, who we're going to work for, those kind of things. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe if you have any questions, that would be easier.
Perfect. Well, students, you can start typing in your questions and I will read them to Christine. But Christine, I'm curious, could you tell us more about your video that went viral with the plastic straw of the sea turtle?
Sure. Yeah, that was maybe a little bit of an unusual situation, which also brought me in a entirely different field of my career. In 2015, I filmed a sea turtle that had a plastic straw stuck in its nose, which I shared on social media. And it kind of made me into, at that point, accidental storyteller. And right now, I'm actually a more conscious science communicator. So I have learned that it is super important that I'm not just publishing my data and do it for other scientists, but that I am pretty much passing on the knowledge I am gaining to non-scientists as well. I'm sorry, something in this room, which is not my room, is connecting to my Bluetooth right now. So yeah, that means I'm using my social media pretty much to talk about my work, to talk about sea turtles in general, to talk about important findings that mean something for all of us and where we all can pitch in and hopefully do better in the future.
How much time do you do field work and or travel?
All right, so that is a hard question. It always depends of the time of the year, the projects I'm on. So this year is a little bit crazy, I would say. Already, without having much planned, I will be traveling about 16 weeks this year, likely more. So this is already what I know, and there's like still kind of question marks on some travel. I do field work since I live literally right next to our projects. I do quite a bit of field work still. I would say estimated probably about 40% of my work is still field work, hopefully. But I also am a one woman show because I founded my own NGO in 2014. And so in order to keep costs low, I pretty much run the entire thing myself. So I do everything from accounting over fund acquisition, fundraising to webmaster. I have our websites, our social media, bookkeeping. I think I said that already. So everything HR that keeps me busy as well. And so on the side, I'm also still being, of course, the scientific head of our projects, trying to support other projects if they in need of a scientific consultant or if they need to train their staff. Right now, I'm also working with some projects in Suriname, which is a country in South America that are trying to get more into sea turtle conservation, because they do have a lot of sea turtles, but not a lot of conservation and research going on. So I'm working with a university there, trying to get a graduate program going where students just have the opportunity to do research right there on their own coastlines.
What is your favorite place that you have worked?
Ooh, I mean, I obviously love Costa Rica. Otherwise, I'm here for 17 years now. But within Costa Rica, there's definitely differences in the beaches I've been working on. And I think one of my all-time favorite beaches is in the very south on the Pacific coast, on the Peninsula Osa. So it's just beautiful, pristine, a lot of turtles, not a lot of people.
What is the most interesting project you have worked on?
I think it's always the one I'm working on at that moment. Because it's like a puzzle, right? You start a scientific project with usually a question. So you have to be a little bit of a detective and find out if somebody else has already answered that question. And if you are unable to find it somewhere answered, then you are thinking about how you could go about answering that question. And then, you start with like experimental design, what we call that. So you have to kind of think about the logistics of how you can collect data, where you would collect data, how you would analyze that data, and what that data would eventually tell you. So yeah, I think it's always the next project I'm working on, because then it's not solved yet. So it's always a mystery.
When did you know you wanted to be a marine biologist?
I knew that I wanted to be a marine biologist pretty much in kindergarten already. At least that's what I've been told from my friends. I cannot remember it, but they've been telling me that I've been running around and talking about how I would like to explore the underwater world.
Do you prefer working for a private organization or a university?
Well, it both has pros and cons. So I would say working for a university, it's of course a lot more stability, a lot more job security. But you also, the higher, first of all, a lot of time with the bachelor or master's, it's difficult to really work for a university. So that means you would have to have a PhD, which means you're probably going to be a postdoc or you're going to be a professor. And that also means you are not going to do a lot more fun stuff. Not always, but a lot of times it's becoming, more you sitting in the office, you're raising the funds, and your students are out there having all the fun. So I really do enjoy having my organizations, and my organization, and I can pretty much decide of how involved or not I want to be in the field work. But I'm also not going to lie, it's usually worse paid depending on what type of organization you work for, especially if you're going to be working in the field. In administration for big organizations, they actually pay pretty well. But especially like grassroots organizations like such as mine, it's not a lot of money that you're making. So, that's a downside. And sometimes you don't know if you're even able to pay yourself a salary next year.
What issue do you research the most?
Excuse me, what?
What issue do you research the most?
What issue? Well, so my specific focus is on the life in water. I actually started just like most other people working on sea turtle nesting beaches. So that means, of course, there will be mainly mother turtles, female turtles, and their babies later on when they hatch. But of course, most sea turtles spend 90% of their time in the water, right? So all the life stages up until they reach adulthood are only in the water. The males stay in the water. And the females, once they're done nesting, they're also in the water, migrating actually really long distances. And so I'm really interested in the connectivities. So for example, the sea turtles that are nesting here in Costa Rica are not actually feeding and staying year round here in Costa Rica. So they're going elsewhere. And we also have younger life stages that are actually feeding here, but we don't know where they will migrate once they reach adulthood or if they stay the entire time. So I'm really interested in answering those type of questions. So what's going on in water, with a purpose that hopefully if there is a certain area that is a hotspot for sea turtles, that we can advise the government, for example, to grant a better protection status to that area.
Have you ever been attacked by any marine life?
Yeah, I've been attacked by fish. Fish can actually be really naughty. But I even have been bit by Yeah, I mean, triggerfish, for example, are very territorial. Barracudas can be a little bit funny. I mean, it's not really scary. It's cute and funny. I have been bit by a sea turtle, but that was dumb. Yeah, I mean, sea turtles are not very aggressive animals, but of course, if you handle them, they don't like it and they will try to defend themselves. And they do not have teeth, but some of them have a very sharp beak. And so I got bit by a turtle.
Do you ever see sharks?
Yes. I mean, we do have quite a few reef sharks here, where we catch turtle in water. We do have bull sharks every once in a while. We have nurse sharks. So yeah, definitely sharks are around.
What issues, threats do things like climate change and local conflicts impose on your work?
Sorry, the second one, so the climate change, and what was the second one?
And local conflicts.
Oh, local conflict. That's a really great question. Two very big topics. So climate change is one of the major things that are threatening sea turtle populations worldwide. Locally, it manifests especially in erosion. So our sea levels are rising. We are losing nesting beaches. One of the projects that we're working on in the Southern Caribbean, the beach has lost 60 meters. Sorry, I'm really bad with imperial numbers, but it's a lot. In the past 15 years, land inwards. So we do have times where there is literally no beach that is suitable for sea turtle nesting, and it unfortunately happens most of the times during the nesting season. The other big problem is that global temperatures are rising, and on our nesting beaches the temperatures are rising as well. And so for the past, I would say 10 years, we are in the majority producing female baby turtles because the biological sex of sea turtles is defined or determined by the incubation temperature. So you have to envision the females come out of the ocean, they dig a little egg chamber into the sand, they put the eggs into the sand, and then they leave. And so the sand is pretty much incubating the eggs. And so whatever the ambient temperature is kind of first of all deciding if the nest will survive. So it has to be within about 24 to 32 degrees Celsius. And depending how hot or cold it is, it will either be female or male. You'll use these kind of to remember it. Hot chicks, cool dudes. So hotter temperatures lead to more females, cooler ones to more male. So it's a problem if there's, of course, only female turtles left in the future. And the local conflict, well, that is a pretty big treasure chest, I would say. Unfortunately, or well, without even any judgment attached to it, but sea turtles do nest a lot of times in very rural areas where there's not a lot of job opportunities for people that live maybe also close to those nesting beaches. So people know that they can make money with sea turtle products, with their eggs, with the meats, and also the turtle shell. And so poaching in countries of the global south, that it be Central America, South America, Asia, Africa, is still pretty high. But I mean, you can not really blame people, right? People try to survive, people try to feed their children. And so a lot of the work that we are doing, we're actually trying to create like a win-win-win situation. So we are providing employment within the area of sea turtle conservation. So we're employing people from the adjacent villages to pretty much conduct our night surveys, to conduct our night patrols that will keep nesting mothers and their eggs safe. And of course, the turtles have one poacher less on the beach. The people have a steady income, and we do have the local knowledge that helps us, of course, to do our jobs where we are.
What are some things that people can do or things you wish people knew in regards to conservation of our oceans?
Well, I think people always tend to forget that we're all connected, right? It doesn't matter how far away from the ocean you live, every river eventually will end up in the ocean. The way how we live on land has a massive impact of how healthy our oceans are. So if we're thinking about how we, for example, produce our food, let it be the meat production, let it be our agriculture, the fertilizers that we use, the pesticides that we use, the medications that we're giving to our cattle and all of that, all of that will make its way into the water and eventually into the ocean. And so it shouldn't be, you know, treated as two separate things, ocean conservation and land conservation, and our lifestyle, the way how we behave on land. We always have to keep in mind that it will have an impact on the ocean as well, if we see it directly or if we won't see it. So I think our world would be a lot better off if people kind of really absorb that knowledge and live by it.
Where is the biggest hotspot for sea turtles and why?
Wow, so we do have different hotspots depending on the species. So worldwide, we have 7 different species of sea turtles. Most of them are kind of, well, yeah, a little bit, yeah, they stick to the hotter water temperatures because sea turtles are reptiles. Reptiles, that's what we call ectotherm. The not so scientific term is cold-blooded, but the blood isn't cold. It just means they cannot regulate their own body temperature, or it means they pretty much depend on the ambient temperature to keep their metabolism going. And so 25 degrees is kind of the, you know, the limit, with some exceptions. So definitely the subtropics and tropics are good areas to find sea turtles. All those that have sandy beaches, there will be very likely sea turtle nesting. But we do have also species such as the leatherback turtle that does nest in those tropical countries because, of course, their eggs need to incubate as well. But they're feeding very far in the south and very far in the north. Actually, as far as our populations here in Costa Rica in the Atlantic feed in front of Nova Scotia in Canada, or in front of Wales, England, and our Pacific population does, for example, feed in front of Peru, or the west coast of the United States gets leatherback turtles from like the area of Papua New Guinea. So from that side, they come to feed, especially in front of California and all of that. So you know, hotspots are kind of everywhere. Sea turtles are actually way more widely distributed as we think, but if you really kind of want to go somewhere and see a turtle, your best chances are in the tropics and subtropics.
What types of sea turtles do you mostly work with? Have you ever worked with leatherbacks?
Yeah, so leatherbacks are actually my first species I've started working with in 2007, and it's still one of my favorite ones, and it's the one that I did my master thesis about, and it's also still one of the species that some of our projects are about. So our Southern Caribbean project is actually on a leatherback nesting beach.
Where can high school students look for an internship?
Well, there's actually quite a few different options. So I always recommend that you go straight through an organization, not using one of those mediator organizations that charge a lot of money, which they pocket and we do not see much of. So if you really feel like you would like to also support us financially, definitely try to go straight through an organization. One good place to start looking for internships is a listserv called Sea Turtle, spelled with a C, ABC. Sea Turtle listserv. If you Google it, you should find it. Then there are job boards such as, for example, the Texas A&M. It used to be Wildlife and Fisheries. I think they just switched the faculty. They renamed their the faculty. So it's. But I think if you Google TAMU Wildlife and Fisheries job board, you will still find it. Another good one is Conservation Careers. So that is, you know, very much in the whole area of conservation where you have a lot of job listings, but also internship listings.
Any particular university or country students should consider if they want to study marine biology?
Well, I always say, you know, try to go as cheap as possible. So since education, especially university education, is quite expensive in the US, don't really get bogged down by like big name universities. Try to get a graduate degree as cheaply as you can, because the more debts you will have, I have seen it in so many students, the more limited you will be in doing, for example, internships for free, right? So of course, I mean, I don't say this is how the world should work. It just is what it is right now. So I would definitely see that you have not a lot of school debts, and you can just go off after your bachelor's degree and just have fun with the degree, and kind of gain all the field experience that you can. And then actually I would definitely consider at least for a master's. I wouldn't jump the master thesis either in biology. I know that it's possible in the US, but I have seen it in colleagues of mine. It is very helpful if you've done a master and also master thesis to really kind of understand of how scientific work works. And it definitely gives you an advantage, and you can always kind of gauge, okay, can I already with a master's degree get the job I want? Because getting into a PhD program is a lot and not a very pleasant path a lot of times. I'm not going to be I'm not trying to get sugarcoat it, and unless you really know what you want to do with a PhD, I would say take it slowly. I mean, you can always come back for a PhD later on in life, even if you've already worked, I don't know, 10 years with a master's degree in something. And also kind of look elsewhere in other countries. So Europe has really great conditions, really great master's programs. Let it be England, for example, Exeter University is a great choice. Of course, Australia also have quite a few programs, but you have to be careful. They might also be quite expensive. And of course, there's a bunch of people that do go and study marine biology in Australia. But France, even Germany has master's programs. So it's definitely a lot cheaper a lot of times than doing a master's in the US or in Australia, for example.
Why would you say that other people should study marine biology?
Well, we have a lot of work to do still in marine conservation. But I also would like to say that it's not only the marine biologists that we need within marine conservation. So if you're more the creative type or more the numbers type, I mean, what I just told you, so I'm running an NGO right now, and I literally would have had to study marketing. I would have had to study accounting, all those kind of things that would have been very helpful to me right now, because effectively that's what I'm also doing. And I would love if I would have just, a little bit more knowledge in those things. And I would love if, for example, we would have good marketing people that are, not just working for the industry, but actually working for conservation. So I just want to make sure that you understand that, the area of marine conservation needs all the help it can get, and it's not just marine biology.
Are sea turtles migrating to cooler temperatures at all to avoid hotter temperatures?
Well, usually it's the other way around. So sea turtles, since they have to sustain their body temperatures above usually about 25 degrees, exception of course leatherbacks, but they're kind of special. They usually migrate to hotter temperatures, warmer temperatures. So we see already, because of the rise in also water temperatures, that sea turtles are venturing in like farther north and farther south than they used to have, which is not always a great thing. And in, for example, the Texas coast, there's a bunch of juvenile green turtles that are using the bayous to feed. And if there are cold snaps, so that means if the temperatures drop very quickly, they should try to get out into deeper waters, because they are more stable in temperature, and they don't drop in temperatures quickly. But almost every year, we have the issue of the so-called cold stunning events. So sea turtles that got surprised by the temperature drops, and they're actually getting paralyzed. And if they don't get taken out of the water and slowly heated up again, they will die.
How different would marine biology look in tropical places compared to places like the Arctic or Antarctic?
Well, first of all, it would be a lot colder in those places. But it would be, of course, a totally different range of species, right? So in the tropics, it would probably more like coral reefs and sea turtles. But there's also species such, for example, humpback whales that will travel between those two habitats. Like they would go, for example, far north or far south to feed, and then they would come into the tropics to yeah, to have their babies, to nurse their babies, to mate again, and then they would migrate back. And of course, if you go into the colder climates, you will maybe study more things such as nutritional cycles, because you have a lot of zooplankton, because that's, you know, where the waters are more productive in the colder water, in the colder areas. Yeah, so I mean, it really kind of just is the group of species or the things that you're interested in. Maybe you're interested in studying orcas or penguins, then of course we have to go to the Antarctic, right? Not to Costa Rica in this case.
What do you think of the Titan incident?
The Titan incident, oh, that is well, human trying to play God didn't work out, I would say. I always have an issue with, you know, money being blown into exploration that is not really furthering our knowledge about any kind of ecological things. And also just for the enjoyment of a few privileged rich. Of course, there was a tragedy. I'm not trying to debate that. Um, but I think there's a lot of tragedy happening in our world that nobody's talking about, just, because it wasn't a few rich people that were on a boat.
Can you share a memorable research project or fieldwork experience that had a significant impact on your understanding of marine life?
Well, I think nowadays we are probably not living in the area of like great discoveries anymore. Because I think back maybe 100 years, everything that we discovered were almost quantum leaps in our understanding of how the natural world worked, right? I mean, if you think about Darwin and his, you know, very revolutionary idea of evolution, that of course then kind of, you know, has been rediscovered and refound in so many different dimensions and whatever. Nowadays I think it's all kind of smaller steps of what we are discovering. So I think every time I just, you know, find one piece of the puzzle, that's more what scientists are like these days. It's exciting, you know, when you find out, for example, where your population is feeding. So right now we are having a satellite transmitter project where we are tracking our hawksbills. Hawksbills here in Costa Rica have been quite understudied because we do not have a lot of them left. And it is quite tedious to get to them since there are not that many left, and to actually get a satellite transmitter on them. And so we have been following quite a few females on their migration after they're done nesting, and have seen of where they are feeding. Also very exciting was to see how they behave when one of the hurricanes hit our coastlines, you know, because that was some behavior that hasn't been actively observed. And so at least with the satellite tracking, we could see how the pattern changed because the hurricane was approaching.
Are there specific skills or qualities that are particularly valuable for individuals aspiring to work in marine biology? And how can students develop these attributes?
Well, I mean, we have been talking a lot about also the aspect that, you know, field work as a marine biologist, but I just want to make sure that everybody knows also that it is biologists, marine biologists that never even set a foot into the oceanic environment. You know, there's people that feel a lot more comfortable in a laboratory, and so maybe they are sitting over a microscope and looking at water samples that have, you know, plankton in it or else. Um, so I think it's really any skill set could be somehow applicable to the world of marine biology. Of course, if you want to work with sea turtles and you really want to work with sea turtles and not just sit in a laboratory and maybe analyze a tissue sample for DNA, but actually work with the animal, I would say being comfortable in the outdoors would be helpful. You know, being able to walk long distances on the sand, to be able to swim. I mean, I don't even think it's necessary to have a scuba diving license, but hey, it's definitely helpful if you do. But snorkeling, being able to snorkel, knowing how to use your snorkeling gear would be helpful. Handling a boat, actually, if you can get like a motorboat license, something like that could be helpful. Knowing how to install a net, getting a net out. Yeah, those kind of things. I mean, everything about science, I think what everybody has to be in common, you have to be meticulous, right? So I think that is the one thing that it doesn't matter if you're in the laboratory or if you're in the field, you have to have this instilled sense of whatever you write down, every number, you have to check and double check to make sure that this number is correct, because it will be transcribed and used later on for certain things, so that you pay a lot of attention to detail in that sense. So that is important in any of those areas. And I think that can be trained, but certain people just have a natural affinity to it as well.
How does international collaboration play a role in marine biology research, and what opportunities exist for professionals to work on a global scale?
Yeah, I think that is actually the beauty in the marine biology and also the sea turtle biology field, since, well, there's actually a petition that wants to kind of get rid of the S in oceans, because it's just one large ocean. It's all connected. And so a lot of the stuff we're working on is connected. If we're talking about different countries, different species even. And so there's a lot of conferences, international conferences that we're going to, where we meet our fellow colleagues that are working in other parts of the world, maybe on the same species, maybe on a different species, maybe on a different topic all entirely, but that are somehow also relevant for us. And so there's always on those conferences a lot of networking going on, and bouncing ideas for studies and how data sets can be reconciliated and used together for like a broader picture of an issue. And of course, that's another thing that I can only recommend. If you are a student interested of getting your foot into the door, it is always helpful to go to those conferences and actually meet the people that you maybe want to work for in the future, or work with the different projects and different organizations. Because of course, if I know somebody already and have met somewhere, I'm probably more inclined of taking them on for an internship than somebody that would just contact me via email. Not that I'm not doing that at all, but I'm just saying it's always easier, to kind of discuss certain things face to face.
Given the importance of public awareness, how do marine biologists engage with communities to communicate the significance of marine conservation efforts?
Yeah, so what we do, and I think most people nowadays also do, is that we have come to realize it is super important to talk to the kids about most of the things. So adults are always a little bit more difficult to convince if they're already in pretty set patterns. So we have a pretty large environmental education program here in Costa Rica, in especially the communities that do, for example, still eat turtle eggs and turtle meat. And we're trying to explain to the kids, how important sea turtles are for the ecosystem, for a healthy ocean, that it's totally not okay to eat an endangered species anymore. And I mean, I've been in this job for 17 years now, and it's really, 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 heartwarming and very feels great that some of the guys that are working now with me were the kids that I taught 17 years ago, right? So it shows that, of course, not everybody will become a sea turtle conservationist, but at least I can see that whatever we did somehow fell onto fertile ground in some of the people.
And I only have one question left for you, Christine. What advice do you have for students who are passionate about marine biology and are considering a career in this field?
Yeah, what I already said, if you're passionate about it, great. Just don't get bogged down by the competitiveness of the whole field, and try really to get hands-on experience as soon as possible, not only to be more competitive, but also to gauge a little bit if you're even comfortable with this type of work. Because I know some of my colleagues that love the idea of being a sea turtle biologist, but they don't actually like the work of a sea turtle biologist, if you know what I mean. So, they love sitting over a beer and tell people, hey, I'm a sea turtle biologist, but they're not very comfortable on the beach, for example, working long nights, those kind of things, being in the outdoors, being surrounded by, I don't know, sandflies that are bugging you and being sweaty and full of turtle mucus and all those kind of things, living in very rustic conditions for a good chunk out of the year, sharing quarters, all of those things that you will have to do if you're doing field work. Or if you're doing lab work and you thought that was great because it's more money, you become a geneticist, and then you are just stuck in the lab and you're really not happy with that either. So I'm always saying, try it out before you're really kind of building your entire career around like this one idea.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today for International Careers Week. I just want to take a moment and thank our sponsors at the Dennis and Phyllis Washington Foundation, Clearwater Credit Union, Humanities Montana, and Stockman Bank. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Thank you, Christine.